Sometimes what hurts the most isn't what happens in the darkness, but what happens in broad daylight, right in front of everyone, while no one notices. My name is Martha. I'm 78 years old today. My hands aren't as steady as they once were, but I can still embroider little napkins for my great-grandchildren. My white hair, which I've pinned in this bun every day for as long as I can remember, was once as black as a ripe blackberry. The years have passed, but some memories don't fade with time. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching this account of my life from. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel and like the video, it helps me a lot. I was born in 1947, in a time when children had no voice. We were expected to listen, obey, and be grateful. In our small town in rural Ohio, life was simple and hard. We were 7 siblings. I was the third. My father worked in the cornfields, which was the gold of our region back then. My poor mother never stopped for a minute. She took care of the house, us children, the vegetable garden, the chickens. She slept after everyone else and woke before the sun. Our house was small, but my mother took pride in keeping everything very clean. The dirt floor was swept every day, and the wooden walls were whitewashed twice a year, always before Easter and before Christmas. We didn't have much, but thank God and my parents' hard work, we never lacked food on the table. My childhood was like that of many girls in rural areas during those times. By age 7, I helped care for my younger siblings, swept the yard, fed the chickens, and went to school when I could in a cramped classroom, almost half an hour's walk away. The teacher, Mrs. Johnson, was strict, but taught us to read and write properly. Many girls my age never had the chance. Sunday was the most sacred day of the week for our family. It was the only day my father didn't go to the fields. We woke up early, had breakfast with cornbread, and everyone went to the 8 o'clock service at the town's little church. I remember going in my blue cotton dress, the only one I had that wasn't for work, and my mother would braid my hair. "Help your sisters with their braids too," she would tell me while preparing the boys' clothes. I didn't complain. I liked feeling useful, seeing my mother's approving smile. After church, we'd return home, and the preparation for the family lunch would begin. The house would smell of sautéed garlic, onions, and stewing chicken. It was the only day of the week we ate meat, which made Sunday special. "Martha, sort through the beans while I pluck the chicken," my mother would ask, and I'd spend hours separating the good beans from the damaged ones and the little stones, while my younger siblings played in the yard. The girls helped set the table. The boys fetched water from the well. Everyone had their task. The Sunday table was covered with a white embroidered tablecloth that my grandmother had made for my mother as a wedding gift. My mother would say, "Remember, this tablecloth means dignity and respect in this family." Uncles, aunts, cousins, and sometimes friends from other farms would come. The house would be full, noisy, with the smell of good food and freshly brewed coffee. Children ran around the yard. Men talked about harvests and politics in the living room. Women exchanged recipes and news. It was on one of those Sundays, after I had just turned 12, that everything began. My Uncle August, my father's older brother, had recently moved to town after becoming a widower. He was a man in his mid-40s, considered handsome by the women in the region, and successful because he owned a small store downtown. Unlike my father's hands, calloused from farm work, his were soft from not doing manual labor. Uncle August always brought candy for us children, and little gifts for my mother, a piece of fabric, fancy soap, things we didn't see often. Everyone was happy when he arrived. My father admired him greatly, saying he was educated because he had completed 3rd grade. In our family, that was almost like being a doctor. "Little Martha, come here, see what your uncle brought for you today," he would say when he arrived. And of course I went. Who wouldn't? In those days, receiving a gift was rare, especially something from town. The Sunday ritual was always the same. A hearty lunch at noon, loud conversations, laughter. Then came the coffee with cornbread or sweet rolls, and then the part that, over time, I learned to fear more than anything, the after-lunch nap. It was customary in my family for the adults to rest a bit after Sunday lunch. The men would stay in the living room, sprawled in chairs or in the only armchair we had. The women would tidy up the kitchen and then rest too, usually in the guest room or my parents' room. We children were sent to the yard so as not to disturb the adults' rest. That Sunday, after I turned 12, my Uncle August called to me as I passed through the hallway. "Little Martha, come here for a moment. I want to show you a book I brought from town," he said with that smile everyone found so pleasant. I entered the room where he was without suspecting anything. After all, he was my uncle, my father's brother, a respected man. What could happen? I entered that room without imagining that my life would change forever. The book really existed. It had pictures of distant places like New York City and Chicago, cities I only knew from the stories my uncle told. I was fascinated by those images. I had never seen skyscrapers before. "Sit here next to your uncle to see better," he said, patting the bed. I obeyed, as I always did with adults. That's when I felt his hand on my back, slowly moving down. An icy shiver ran up my spine. It didn't seem right, but who was I to question? A 12-year-old girl, grown for her age, as they said, but still just a child. "You're turning into a pretty young lady, Martha," he murmured near my ear, with a smell of whiskey mixed with coffee that made me nauseous. What happened next is still difficult to talk about, even after so many years. His hands, his mouth, his weight, and the silence he demanded afterward. "This is our little secret," he said, adjusting his clothes. "If you tell anyone, you'll destroy the family. Your father will lose the job I got him at the co-op. Your mother will get sick with grief, and nobody will believe you because I'm a respected man in town. And you're just a little girl." I left that room different from how I entered it. Something inside me had broken. I couldn't look at the white tablecloth without seeing stains that no one else could see. I couldn't taste the sweetness of cornbread without my stomach turning. That night, I cried, hidden under the blanket that I shared with my sisters. I bit the pillow so no one would hear my sobs. I prayed to the Virgin Mary for this to never happen again. But my prayers weren't answered. The following Sunday, Uncle August appeared again, and the next, and the next. It was as if all the Sundays of my life had turned into a nightmare. The ritual would repeat itself. Church, lunch, conversations, coffee, and the horror that came after. I began developing strategies to avoid being alone. Learning to survive was my only option. During the week, I lived in fear of Sunday's arrival. At school, I couldn't concentrate. The teacher called my mother, concerned about my performance, which had previously been so good. "What's happening?" she asked, worried. I opened my mouth, but the words didn't come out. Fear paralyzed me. "I'm tired, Mom," was all I managed to say. I started inventing tasks for myself on Sundays. I would offer to wash all the dishes after lunch, even though it was too much for my small hands. "Let me do it, Mom. You've already worked too much," I would say, knowing that no adult would interrupt their rest to come get me. Other times, I pretended to have stomach or head pains. "I think I ate too much," I'd explain, and run to the yard where I stayed with my younger siblings. I would invent noisy games, knowing my uncle wouldn't try anything with so many witnesses nearby. When these strategies failed, I would simply disappear. I'd go to the barn and hide among the corn sacks, or climb an apple tree in the back of the yard and stay there quietly until I was sure the danger had passed. Sometimes I'd get scolded for having disappeared, but I preferred punishment 1,000 times over the alternative. The months went by, and with them, Sundays that seemed to drag on like years. I changed. My mother said I was becoming shy, that I wasn't the talkative and smiling girl I used to be. My father thought it was just my age, that all young girls become quieter as they grow up. No one realized that those silences carried screams. In early 1961, something changed in our routine. My cousin Selena, my aunt's daughter on my mother's side, came to live with us. She was 10 years old and had lost her mother to tuberculosis. My parents, with their big hearts, welcomed her as a daughter. Selena was a sweet girl with curly hair and freckles on her nose. We soon became close. She slept in the same bed as me and my sisters, and we became confidants. We told each other secrets at night under the dim light of the oil lamp when everyone was already asleep. All secrets except the one consuming me from within. One Sunday in March, I noticed my uncle's gaze lingering on Selena during lunch, the way he called her "little flower" and put his hand on her shoulder when offering candy, the way he asked if she was already learning to embroider like the young ladies. I recognized the signs. the same ones that preceded my torment. Something inside me boiled. I could handle what they did to me. I was used to it, if one can ever get used to such horror. But I would never allow Selena to go through the same. When I saw them together in the hallway, him saying, "Come see this magazine from the Capitol," with that smile I knew too well, my heart raced. My hands grew cold with sweat. It was as if time stood still for a moment. "Selena," I shouted before she reached the bedroom door. "Mom's calling you to help with dessert." My cousin turned, hesitant. My uncle frowned, irritated by the interruption. "Your mother didn't call anyone, Martha. Stop making up stories," he said in a stern tone. But I was already pulling Selena by the hand. "Yes, she did, and she said it's urgent." I dragged my cousin to the kitchen where my mother was brewing coffee. She looked at us, surprised. "Mom, can I teach Selena how to make that pumpkin pie you taught me?" I asked, almost breathless. My mother smiled, not understanding my agitation, but happy with my sudden interest. "Of course, honey. Get the pumpkin from the pantry and the sugar from the tin." We spent the rest of the afternoon in the kitchen, grating pumpkin and stirring the pot. My eyes never left the door, alert to any movement. When my uncle appeared for coffee, his gaze met mine. There was anger there and a silent promise that I would pay for this. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't speak, but I could act. Every Sunday would be a battle, and I would fight with all my strength to protect Selena, even if it meant putting myself in even more danger. I created tasks that kept us both busy, washing clothes, sweeping the yard, helping in the kitchen. I taught her how to climb the apple tree with me, our secret refuge where we would spend hours making up stories and dreaming of impossible futures. The price was high. My uncle found ways to isolate me when my strategies failed, and his anger made everything even worse. "You're causing problems, Martha," he would say in that calm voice that only I knew how dangerous it was. "Girls who cause problems end up alone. Nobody likes troublemakers." The years 1962 and 1963 passed like this, in a silent war that no one else noticed. On one side, an adult man respected by everyone. On the other, a teenage girl that everyone saw as weird and difficult. I lost weight, had nightmares. My performance at school plummeted. At 15, I seemed to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, and in a way, I did. It was on a Sunday in March 1964 that my life changed forever. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The radio was reporting disturbances in Washington, something about civil rights and protests, things that seemed as distant as the moon to us in the countryside. My father and my uncle were discussing politics in the living room while we helped my mother with lunch. That morning, Selena was turning 13. My mother had made a simple cornbread with strawberry jam to celebrate. We couldn't afford parties, but that small gesture meant a lot. Selena was radiant, wearing a dress my mother had secretly sewn during the nights of the previous week, with a floral fabric she had been saving for special occasions. "Today you look like a real young lady," said my Uncle August when he arrived, carrying a small package in his hands. "I have a special gift for you." His look froze me inside. I recognized the hidden intention in those seemingly innocent words. For almost 3 years, I had managed to protect Selena by creating invisible barriers, never leaving her alone. But that day, I realized it wouldn't be enough. My uncle was determined, and the birthday was the perfect excuse to give special attention to his niece. After lunch, as always, came the moment of rest. I saw when my uncle called Selena to show her the gift he had brought. "Let's go to the guest room where it's cooler for you to open your package," he said with that syrupy voice that gave me chills. Something exploded inside me. It was as if all the dams holding back my fear, anger, and despair for all those years had given way at once. Without thinking of the consequences, I crossed the room in quick steps and grabbed Selena's arm. "She's not going anywhere alone with you," I said in a voice that didn't seem like mine. It was firm, loud, determined. The whole room fell silent. My father, who was dozing in the rocking chair, woke up startled. My mother stopped collecting the plates. My siblings, who were fighting over a piece of cake, froze. "What did you say, girl?" asked my uncle with a forced smile on his face. "I just want to give Selena a present on her day," I repeated, trembling from head to toe, but not backing down. "She's not going anywhere alone with you. Not ever again. My father stood up, his face red with embarrassment at my attitude. Martha, what kind of manners are these? Apologize to your uncle right now. It was at that moment that everything overflowed. The tears I had swallowed for years ran down my face. Before I share this painful revelation that hurts me to this day, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps me a lot to continue sharing these stories. I will not apologize. The words caught in my throat. How to explain the inexplicable? How to name what I didn't fully understand? He does things to me, I finally managed to say between sobs, things an uncle shouldn't do to his niece. Since I was 12. Every Sunday when you all rest. The silence that followed was so dense you could cut it with a knife. I saw my uncle's face transform, first surprise, then anger, and finally that calm smile of someone certain of their own position. Well, look at that, he said, shaking his head. The girl is making up stories. She's always been like that, full of fantasies. Must be jealous of the attention I'm giving to Selena. My father seemed lost, looking from me to my uncle, not knowing who to believe. It was then that my mother, who had been standing at the kitchen door with a stack of plates in her hands, let everything fall to the floor. The sound of breaking dishes cracked like thunder in that stuffy room. Is it true, Martha? She asked in a voice I had never heard before. It wasn't accusatory or suspicious. It was the voice of a mother who suddenly saw what had been in front of her all along. I couldn't answer with words, just nodded, affirming as tears kept falling. My uncle let out a forced laugh. Betty, you're not going to believe this nonsense, are you? Look, the girl is disturbed, always has been. We need to understand that teenagers make things up. It was the only time I saw my mother interrupt a man. Shut up, August, she said, walking towards me. Her hands, always rough from work, touched my face with a delicacy that broke something inside me. How long, honey? Since I turned 12. Every Sunday when you all rest, I repeated, unable to elaborate more. I saw the horror spread across her face, followed by a painful understanding. All the changes in my behavior, my fear of Sundays, my made-up stomach aches, my strategies to never be alone. Suddenly, it all made sense to her. My father seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. August, is this true? He asked his brother in a trembling voice. Of course not, Anthony. How can you believe such a story? I'm your brother. I take care of you all, got you a job at the co-op. Is this how you thank me, believing the lies of a troubled girl? My father faltered. I could see the doubt in his eyes. My uncle was his older brother, his safe harbor, the one who always solved the family's problems. How could he believe that this same man was capable of such monstrosity? It was then that Selena, who had been silent the whole time, took a step forward. She protected me, she said softly. Every Sunday, Martha invented tasks for us both. She never left me alone with Uncle August for even a minute. I thought she didn't like me being near him, but now I understand. Those simple words changed everything. My mother turned to my uncle, her eyes full of a fury I had never seen. Get out of my house, she ordered. Now. You will regret this, my uncle threatened, looking directly at me. No one will believe you, little Martha. You know why? Because I am somebody in this town, and you are nothing. My father, who had been paralyzed until then, suddenly advanced. I had never seen my father, always such a calm and restrained man, act with such violence. He grabbed my uncle by the shirt and pushed him against the wall. If you touch a hair on my daughter's head again, I will kill you, he said in a voice that didn't sound like his. Get out of my house and never come back. When my uncle left, slamming the door, a storm broke, not just outside with the thunder announcing the rain, but inside our living room too. My father collapsed in the chair, his face buried in his hands, sobbing like a child. My mother hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe, as if she could erase 3 years of pain with that gesture. Why didn't you tell us before, honey? She asked through tears. He said no one would believe me, that Dad would lose his job at the co-op, that you would be ashamed of me, I answered, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, even if the pain remained. In the days that followed, our family changed forever. Sunday lunches ended. The white embroidered tablecloth was stored at the bottom of the trunk, as if it carried the stain of that revealed secret. My father quit his job at the co-op, preferring to return to manual labor in the fields rather than continue under his brother's influence. The small town, as it was, soon buzzed with comments. They broke ties with August, that good man, some said. It must have been a fight over money, others speculated. No one knew the truth, and my parents decided it was better that way. Some shames aren't ours to carry, my mother said with a wisdom I only understood many years later. To my surprise, my nights became more peaceful. The nightmares didn't disappear completely, but diminished. At school, my performance improved again. It was as if a shadow had been partially removed from my life. However, not everything was roses. My father carried a weight of guilt that bent him like a physical burden. Many nights I found him crying alone on the porch. "Forgive me, daughter," he would say when I hugged him. "I should have noticed. I should have protected you." My mother became my fortress. It was she who insisted that I continue my studies, even when money was tight. "Education is the only thing no one can take away from you," she repeated. It was also she who, defying all the customs of the time, took me to a doctor in the neighboring town to make sure I was physically well. This doctor, Dr. Parker, was the first person outside the family to know what happened. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Wilson, your daughter isn't the first, nor will she be the last," he said sadly, as my mother, embarrassed but determined, explained the situation. "Silence is the greatest ally of these criminals," he continued. It was the first time I heard someone call my uncle a criminal. Somehow, that word liberated me. What happened to me wasn't a family secret or an adult thing, as my uncle taught. It was a crime, and I wasn't guilty. Embroidering a new path, reconstruction of life, and teacher training. In the months following the revelation, our family needed to reinvent itself. The year 1964 brought changes not just for us, but for the entire country. The radio announced the Civil Rights Act. Words like equality and rights reached our rural area, even if we didn't fully understand what they meant. "Times are changing, Martha," my father said one night while listening to the news. "They say it's for the better, but I don't know. Whenever the powerful talk about change, it's the common folk who end up suffering." Our life had completely transformed. Without the co-op job, my father returned to working in the fields from sunrise to sunset. Our savings were scarce. My mother started taking in laundry and making pies to sell at the Sunday farmers market. That day, which was once sacred for rest, had now become a work day for us. Curiously, it was in this hardship that I found my calling. Since we were many siblings and money was tight, I started giving tutoring lessons to neighborhood children. I charged almost nothing, sometimes just a dozen eggs or a pumpkin from the garden. But that activity lit something inside me. "You have a way with teaching," said Mrs. Thompson, our neighbor, after her son passed the grade thanks to my lessons. "The children like you, Martha. You have patience that many school teachers don't have." In 1965, something happened that would change my trajectory. The only school in town needed an assistant teacher. The head teacher, Mrs. Johnson, was already advanced in age and couldn't handle the 40 children alone. "Why don't you try, Martha?" my mother suggested. "You're already teaching half the neighborhood children at home anyway." I hesitated. At 18, I had barely finished elementary school. How could I be a teacher? Besides, I carried the marks of the past. In the small town, suspicious looks followed me. No one knew exactly what had happened, but rumors ran wild. Some said I had disrespected my uncle. Others that I had tried to seduce a married man in town. People always prefer to believe the worst about a young woman. "I don't know if they'll accept me, Mom," I confessed. "You know how people are. They talk a lot about us." My mother, with that simple but profound wisdom, looked me in the eyes. "Daughter, the one who should be ashamed is the one who did wrong, not the one who suffered from it. Walk with your head held high. What happened to you doesn't define who you are." Armed with this borrowed courage, I went to talk to Mrs. Johnson. To my surprise, she received me with a tight hug. "I've been waiting for you to come," she said. "You were always my brightest student, even when you stopped paying attention in class. I knew something had happened, but I never imagined—" She didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. In the empty classroom, far from the town's ears, Mrs. Johnson confessed to me that she too had been a victim of abuse in her youth. "That's why I never married," she explained. I could never trust any man after that. It was the first time I realized I wasn't alone, that silent pain was shared by other women, forming an invisible sisterhood of survivors. The next day, I started as an assistant. The salary was minimal, but it meant a lot to our family. More importantly, those daily hours at school were my refuge, my chance to rebuild something from the pieces. The children didn't know about my past, didn't judge me. For them, I was just Teacher Martha, who taught letters with patience and made up songs to help them memorize the multiplication tables. When a child learned to write their own name for the first time, the smile on their little sweaty face was like a healing balm on my wounds. In 1967, a federal program called VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, came to our region. It was a campaign to teach adults to read, and they needed teachers willing to give evening classes. Mrs. Johnson, already tired from age, recommended me. "It's your chance to grow, Martha," she said. "Don't let the past steal your future." So, at 20, I was teaching children by day and adults by night. Men and women who worked all day in the fields would come, often walking for miles, to learn to read and write by the light of oil lamps. Their effort inspired me, gave me strength to continue. Among these adult students was Mr. John, a 58-year-old carpenter who had never held a pencil. "I want to learn to read the Bible before I die," he would tell me. His calloused hands trembled as he formed the first letters, but his determination was unshakable. It was Mr. John who, without knowing it, helped me take another step in healing. One night in June, during the 4th of July celebration we organized at the school, he called me aside. "Teacher Martha, I brought a gift for you," he said, extending a package wrapped in butcher paper. It was a small wooden box, hand-carved with designs of birds and flowers. "To keep your important things," he explained proudly. At that moment, something broke inside me. It was the first gift I had received from a man since the poisoned gifts from my uncle. But this one was different. It was sincere, without ulterior motives, made with respect and authentic gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. John," I managed to say, swallowing the tears. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever received." That little box became my talisman. In it, I kept my first paycheck as an official teacher when Vista formally hired me in 1968. I also kept the letter I received from the state education secretary, inviting me to take the teacher training course in Columbus, with all expenses paid by the government. "You're going, Martha," my father stated when I showed him the letter, hesitant. He was no longer the man broken by guilt. Gradually, he had regained his strength, though he was never the same again. "Your mother and I will manage here. This is your chance for a better life." In January 1969, I boarded the bus to Columbus. It was my first trip away from home. I remember the fear mixed with excitement at seeing the big city buildings, the paved streets, the store windows. The course lasted 6 months, and we stayed in an old convent adapted to house teachers from rural areas. It was there that I met other young women like me, simple girls from small places, but with big dreams. Among them was Clara, a young woman from Cincinnati who soon became my inseparable friend. Clara was different from anyone I had ever met. She had short hair, like Jane Fonda, she would say, referring to the actress who caused a scandal for her freedom. She wore pants even outside physical education classes and spoke openly about politics. "You need to read these books, Martha," she would tell me, passing copies of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed that circulated secretly among the students. Education isn't just teaching to read and write. It's teaching to think critically, to question, to transform reality. Those ideas were revolutionary to me. In our small town, education was seen only as a means to get a better job or to know how to sign one's own name. With Clara and Paulo Freire, I learned it could be much more. In the evenings at the dorm, while other girls talked about boyfriends or exchanged recipes, Clara and I discussed how we could apply those new teaching methods in our communities. "I dream of schools where children don't just memorize content, but learn to be full citizens," she would say. "But we have to be careful," Clara always warned, lowering her voice. "The conservatives don't like this type of education. Teachers have been fired for less. That was a period of intense discoveries. I discovered there was a much bigger world beyond my small town. I discovered that the scars of the past could hurt less if I concentrated on building something meaningful. I discovered I had my own voice, opinions, ideas worth sharing. When I returned home in July 1969, I was a different person. I had a teaching diploma, a better salary guaranteed by the state, and a mission clear in my mind: education as a tool for transformation. My mother noticed the change as soon as I got off the bus. "You're different, honey," she commented as we walked home. "There's light in your eyes again." It was true. That light that had gone out on those horror Sundays was coming back, not equal to the childish innocence I lost forever, but like a more mature, more resilient flame. In the years that followed, I transformed the small town school with the techniques learned in the course and the methods of Paulo Freire that Clara taught me in secret. I created reading circles, community gardens where children learned science in practice, and even a mimeographed school newspaper. Some more conservative families found it strange at first. "Teacher is teaching too many things," they would comment. "Children only need to read, write, and do arithmetic." But soon the results showed. My students not only passed tests with high grades, but became more confident, more critical, more capable of dreaming beyond the limits imposed by poverty. In 1971, when the school received a visit from the regional education supervisor, he was so impressed that he invited me to give lectures at other schools in the region. "I've never seen rural children so well prepared," he said, leafing through the students' notebooks. "What you're doing here is extraordinary, Teacher Martha." That night, sitting on the porch with my mother, contemplating the stars that seemed brighter than ever, I realized I had transformed pain into purpose. The horror of Sundays hadn't defined me. I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor, a builder, an educator. "I'm proud of you, daughter," my mother said, taking my hand. "You took something so ugly and turned it into something beautiful." That's when I decided I needed to go beyond the classroom. If my experience had taught me anything, it was that silence feeds predators. In our community and so many others across America, girls continued to be abused, violated, silenced, often by those who should protect them. With Clara's support, who now directed a school in Cincinnati, I began organizing discreet meetings with women from the region. At first, they were just conversations about women's health, basic rights, children's education. But soon they transformed into something deeper. Safe spaces where women could share their stories of abuse, domestic violence, abandonment, where they could cry without judgment and find strength to change their realities. We held these meetings at the back of the school after classes, disguised as a sewing club so as not to raise suspicions. There, between threads and needles, we wove a support network that saved many lives. "You gave me courage to leave home with my children," Teresa told me, a young mother who had suffered violence from her husband for years. "If the teacher could face what she faced and is here, so strong, I can too." It wasn't easy. We lived in times of social conservatism, when meetings were viewed with suspicion by authorities. Additionally, challenging the patriarchy rooted in that rural society earned us powerful enemies. More than once I was called a women's libber or a home wrecker for defending women who wanted to leave abusive husbands. But every girl we managed to protect, every woman who found her voice, every family that rebuilt itself on healthier foundations was worth any risk. The pain I carried for years hadn't been in vain if I could prevent others from going through the same. In 1972, my mother fell ill. It wasn't anything specific that the doctors could name. It seemed more like a profound fatigue, as if all those years of hard work and silent pains finally took their toll. Her hands, which had always been so agile at the stove and the sewing machine, now trembled holding a cup. Her body, once tireless, now needed frequent breaks. "It's nothing, honey, I'm just getting old," she would say, trying to reassure me. But I knew it was more than that. My mother was only 52, too young for that decline. It was during this period that I decided to transform our house. My older siblings had already married and left. The younger ones worked in the neighboring town, returning only on weekends. The big house that before barely accommodated our numerous family now seemed too empty and silent. "Mom," I proposed one Saturday afternoon, while helping her rinse clothes in the tub, What do you think about using the empty rooms to receive girls who need a safe place? She stopped what she was doing and looked at me with that expression that meant she was seriously considering something. What kind of girls, Martha? Girls like I was, who have nowhere to go, who are suffering in silence. My mother was silent for a long moment, looking beyond the yard to the green hills that surrounded our small town. Finally, she smiled, a tired smile but full of determination. Your father will complain at first, but then he'll accept. He always ends up accepting when it comes to doing good. And so began what would become my greatest legacy. At first, it was just one girl, Lucy, 14 years old, who appeared at school with purple marks on her arms and fear in her eyes. When I discovered that her stepfather was molesting her, with the silent complicity of her alcoholic mother, I offered our house as a refuge. Lucy was the first, but not the last. Soon came Abigail, who at 15 had been sold by her own father to a 60-year-old farmer. Then, Mary Jo, who ran away from home pregnant by her uncle. And after that, so many others that we soon needed to adapt the barn to create more rooms. Teacher Martha's house became known throughout the region. For some, it was a scandal. She shelters lost girls, said the most venomous tongues. For others, especially women, it was a beacon of hope in the midst of darkness. My father, as my mother predicted, resisted at first. What will people think of us? He worried. But when he saw Lucy, so small and fragile, helping my mother in the kitchen with touching dedication, his heart softened. Soon he was building new bunk beds and teaching the girls to plant in the garden that we expanded. It wasn't easy. We had no resources beyond my teacher's salary and my father's small rural pension. The girls often arrived with nothing but the clothes on their backs and traumas so deep that they manifested in nightmares, crying spells, and sometimes self-destructive behaviors. But we had something more valuable than money. We knew the path to healing because we had traveled it ourselves. It won't always be like this, I would say to each new girl who arrived. The pain doesn't go away completely, but you learn to build something new on top of it, like a tree that grows stronger where it was pruned. In 1973, when we already had 7 girls living with us, I received an unexpected visit. It was a social worker sent by the Department of Social Services, recently created by the federal government. We received complaints, she said, sitting at our kitchen table, that you are sheltering minors without legal authorization. My heart froze. It was true. We had no official papers, no formal registration. It was just an extended family created by necessity and love. These girls had nowhere to go, I argued. Some were being abused, others were. The social worker, Mrs. Ellis, was a middle-aged woman with hair tied in a severe bun and glasses that couldn't hide the weariness in her eyes. She listened to me in silence, taking notes on her clipboard. I'll need to interview each of them, she said finally, and check the housing conditions. For 3 days, Mrs. Ellis looked at every corner of our house, talked to each girl, checked the school notebooks, inspected the food in the pantry. I lived in constant anxiety, fearing that at any moment she might order the closure of our little refuge. At the end of the 3rd day, she called me for a private conversation. What you're doing here is irregular, she began, and my heart sank. But it's necessary. I have 25 years of public service, and I've never seen anything like it. These girls would have ended up in much worse situations if it weren't for you. She took off her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes before continuing. I'm going to help you regularize this. We'll transform your house into a home officially recognized by the state. You'll receive a small monthly allowance and can legally accept donations. I was speechless, with tears streaming down my face. Mrs. Ellis smiled, the first genuine smile since she'd arrived. I was once one of those girls too, Teacher Martha. Only in my time, there was no one like you to take me in. In December 1973, we received the official certificate, Daisy Home, Shelter Center for Girls in Vulnerable Situations. The name was chosen by the girls themselves, inspired by the simple but resilient flowers that grew in abundance in our yard, even in the most adverse conditions. With official recognition came more resources, but also more responsibilities. We needed to hire a cook to help my mother, who no longer had the health to feed so many mouths. Selena, my cousin whom I had protected from my uncle years before, returned to town after graduating in nursing in Chicago and began working with us, caring for the girls' health. It was Selena who suggested celebrating our strength, not to hide our fears. On the first Sunday of 1974, we inaugurated this new tradition. The table was set in the yard under the big maple tree, as the house could no longer accommodate all of us. The old embroidered tablecloth that had been stored at the bottom of the trunk for so many years was brought out to cover the table, no longer as a symbol of false family perfection, but as a witness to our ability to transform pain into beauty. For this first lunch, we invited all the women who had helped us over the years. Clara, my friend from training days, Mrs. Johnson, now retired but still lucid, Mrs. Ellis, the social worker who had become our ally, and so many others who had somehow contributed to our daily little miracle. As I observed that table full of women and girls talking, laughing, sharing stories and dreams, I thought of the long road we had traveled since those silent Sundays of my childhood. The wounds were still there, in me and in many of them, but they didn't bleed as much anymore. We had learned to embroider new designs, new meanings, new possibilities over them. In 1975, when the UN declared the International Women's Year, our little refuge was already known throughout the region. We received visits from journalists from New York who published a report about our work in a women's magazine. The title of the article was simple but powerful: "The House Where Girls Find Their Voice." The coverage brought more visibility and with it more resources, but also more challenges. There were attempts at interference from local politicians who wanted to use our work to gain votes. There were veiled threats from powerful men whose abuses we had exposed by sheltering their victims. There was even an attempt at arson one night in June 1976, which fortunately was contained before causing major damage. But for every obstacle, 10 helping hands emerged. Women of all social classes began to organize around Daisy Home. Female doctors offered free consultations, female lawyers helped with custody processes, volunteer teachers gave reinforcement classes. In 1977, we inaugurated a small library on the adjacent lot, purchased with donations. We named it Betty Library, in honor of my mother, who had passed away the year before. Her last request was that we continue the work until no girl needs to flee from her own family to be safe. I promised her I would do exactly that, and I kept my promise. Today, at 78 years old, I still live in the same house, though much expanded and renovated over the years. Daisy Home has become an organization with branches in 3 cities in the region. We've sheltered more than 2,000 girls over these decades. Many of them went on to brilliant paths, becoming doctors, teachers, lawyers, nurses. Some returned to work with us, perpetuating the cycle of healing and growth. Others continued their lives in distant places, but keep in touch, sending letters, photos of their children, news of their achievements. Every Sunday, we still maintain our tradition of outdoor lunch. The table has grown so large that it now extends throughout the yard. The old embroidered tablecloth was retired and is framed at the entrance of the home as a reminder of our origins. In its place, we use tablecloths made by the girls themselves in our sewing workshop. Looking back at the frightened girl I was, at the Sundays that were a nightmare, at the silence that almost destroyed me, I feel a deep gratitude for the journey. I didn't choose what happened to me, but I chose what to do with it. I transformed a Sunday of horror into thousands of Sundays of hope. That's what I tell the girls who come to us, still broken, still bleeding inside. Your story doesn't end at the most painful chapter. You still have many blank pages to write. And when I see their eyes lighting up with a new possibility, when I observe their postures changing from bent to upright, when I hear their voices, once whispers, now firm and clear, I know that every tear, every sleepless night, every struggle against the system or against my own internal demons was worth it. Everything was worth it because the silence was broken, and once broken, it can never completely imprison again. As the embroidery that one of our girls made says, hanging at the entrance of the home, where one voice rises, 1,000 voices find courage. This is my story. A story of pain, yes, but mainly of resistance, of love that expands like circles in water. A story that began at a Sunday table and that will continue far beyond me, in each girl who finds here not just refuge, but possibility. Because in the end, That's what life is about. Transforming the tables where we experienced horror into tables where we serve hope. Share my story, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like the video. It helps me a lot to bring new videos every day. Until next time, dear friends.